Singapore is ideal for starting a new company. With state-of-the-art infrastructure and government support, you'd be hard-pressed to find a better business location in the Asian market. With the significance of the Asian market currently rising, the timing couldn't be more perfect. The big question that comes to mind is, can foreigner register company in Singapore? Yes, in this video, we will explain how foreigners can register a company in Singapore, as evident from the number of high-profile companies already present. The business landscape is positive, but registration for a foreigner isn't as easy as most other countries. Firstly, what are the minimum legal requirements for registering a Singapore company for a foreigner? Registering a company in any country must be done the right way to avoid legal issues down the line. Certain requirements must be met before you can own and register a company in Singapore. Some of the minimum requirements for a foreigner to own a company in Singapore are: 1. Minimum age requirement. To own a company in Singapore, you must be a legal adult, at least 18 years old. Anyone who meets this age requirement is eligible to start a company in Singapore. The only people exempt from this, despite meeting the legal age limit, are bankrupt individuals and legally convicted individuals. 2. Resident director. The director of the company must be Singaporean and available in the country. Anyone that is a Singaporean resident or holds the eligible employment pass qualifies for this. You must have at least a resident or local director when registering a company. If you aren't based in Singapore, you may need a professional service provider to help with the appointment. PREMIA TNC, serving as your proxy, can provide local nominee director services to you. 3. Local address. To register a company in Singapore, the company will need to have a local address. The address will need to be a physical location, not a virtual one or a P.O box. The address will serve as the registered office address of the company's business operations in Singapore. PREMIA TNC can provide the local register address to meet the company registration requirements if you do not have a physical office in Singapore during the initial process. 4. A company secretary. The company is required to have at least one company secretary during registration. The company's secretary must be a Singapore resident or someone with a Singapore address or work pass. The secretary will need to be hired in Singapore, a process that PREMIA TNC can handle for you. 5. Minimum capital requirement. There is a minimum capital requirement of 1 Singapore dollar or its equivalent in international currencies. This doesn't mean you will need only 1 Singapore dollar to run your company. You will need to have enough money to fund the initial business operations until the company becomes financially independent. 6. A physical presence. You do not need to be physically present to register a company in Singapore. However, if you prefer to be, you can achieve this by obtaining a work pass and relocating to Singapore. Alternatively, you can appoint a nominee resident director to stand in your stead. PREMIA TNC can serve in this capacity, giving you a physical presence and handling the company's registration on your behalf. Next, the registration process for foreigners for a Singapore company. There is a specific process that needs to be followed when registering a company in Singapore. 1. Choosing a company type. The rest of the registration process will usually depend on the type of company you are creating. There are 3 business types you can create, namely sole proprietorship, limited liability partnership, and private limited company. 2. Defining the company's business operations. The type of business you intend to conduct. 3. Filing the registration with ACRA. The registration process is done online at the ACRA portal once all requirements have been met. You will need to provide documents proving all requirements have been met before the company can be registered. Documents like the approved company name, among others, will be needed in this stage. 4. Detailing the company members. During the registration process, you will be required to provide the local registered office address and the details of the resident director and secretary. Identification of all registered members of the company, including shareholders, will also be needed at this stage. Next, can a foreigner own 100% equity of a Singapore company? Yes, a foreigner can own up to 100% equity of a Singapore company. The ownership of equity of a Singapore company may be subject to certain legal requirements like minimum age. You don't have to be in Singapore to own and run the company. Finally, the cost of registering a company in Singapore. As a foreigner, the registration of your company must be handled by an approved service provider. PREMIA TNC handles registration on behalf of individuals or companies looking to expand to Singapore. The total cost of registration is difficult to estimate most times, as it involves several processes. Each process in the registration carries a different cost, with licenses costing you as well. The main administrative fees that will be incurred are related to ACRA registration. You will spend approximately 315 Singapore dollars on ACRA registration. The first 15 Singapore dollars is to reserve the name of your company, subject to approval. You have 60 days reservation for the company name you have chosen. If you wish to extend the registration, that costs extra. The main ACRA registration fee costs 300 Singapore dollars. Once ACRA confirms your registration, you will be notified via email with a business profile. To complete your set of statutory documents, a certificate of incorporation should also be purchased, for an additional cost. Besides the above administrative fees, kindly note that costs for documentation, a registered office address, company secretary fees and local director service fees should also be taken into consideration. Taxes and other fees will also be necessary and cost different amounts, depending on other factors like company type. Contact us for a free consultation on registering a company in Singapore as a foreign business owner today.